So, based on what we know, Pocahontas probably looked nothing like this. She probably looked more like this image here. That's probably the closest, most accurate image we have of her. But in any case, for Rolfe, she was quite an attractive prospect. There were only a handful of women who lived in Virginia in the early years, and most of them were from the servant class, which was below his class as a minor gentleman. Once she was baptized in Christianity as the daughter of a chief, she would have been considered a high ranking woman. And as a result, Rolfe actually had to ask the permission to marry her from Virginia's governor, a man named Thomas Dale. And what he wanted to do was quell the rumors that he was marrying above his class, as marrying a princess. He was marrying above kind of the minor level gentleman that he was. And he did convince Thomas Dale, the governor, that he was in love with her. And despite that, and he actually said this about her, we have this as an actual quote: her education rude, her manner barbarous, and her generation accursed, and so discrepant in all nature from myself. So he kind of gave her some backhanded compliments there, but he's like, yeah, I love her even though she's stupid and barbarous and so different. But in any case, the arrangement was agreed upon by the authorities, both by the governor of Virginia and Powhatan, and Dale thought that the wedding would symbolize a victory over the Powhatans. So Rolfe took Pocahontas on a tour of England in 1616 after they were married, and called her a princess, claimed that he had married into royalty. And she played the part. She acted like people wanted her to act in England, with the kind of dignity that English people would expect a princess to have. And unfortunately for her, she died the following year from a disease she contracted in England. It was probably not a good idea to take her to England, but he did. We don't know much about how their relationship worked. We know what the benefits were for Rolfe. Not very many women in Virginia, and also this diplomatic aspect to it. But we don't know exactly if there was benefit for Madawaska or not. Was she in that relationship because she was forced to be? We don't really know. Or was she an active participant who was trying to use the relationship to her best advantage? We don't really know what her thoughts on the situation were. We do know that she met with John Smith, so there is some truth to the fact that she did meet John Smith. So John Smith was part of the initial Virginia expedition, head of security. There was kind of an altercation with the Powhatans. Pocahontas probably was involved in kind of a ceremony with it, and he was impressed by her. But then Smith, about a year after that, was standing over a fire and had one of his gunpowder pouches too close to the fire. It blew a huge big chunk of his thigh off, and so he had to go back to England, and was no longer in shape to be the head of security in Virginia anymore. And he went back to England and did meet with Pocahontas when her new husband John Rolfe took her there. And supposedly at that meeting, she was pretty upset with him. She refused to speak with him for hours, and when she finally did, she was very angry at him and said he had mistreated her father. And the witnesses in the area said that she yelled at him, "Your people lie very much," or "your countrymen lie much," which sounds about right. She was a novelty to English people, and she was never quite accepted as an English woman. And then she died a year after that trip to England. So she and Rolfe were only married for about 3.5 years. We don't know if she'd have been able to return to Virginia, if that would have helped relations with the Powhatan Confederacy, Rolfe did go back and to Virginia, and he got more wealthy, gained more land, and was quite famous. Even with Pocahontas dead, he was famous for having been her husband, both in England and among the natives. And then he died in the 1620s, and the English and Powhatans, they fought two more wars in the next 25 years, but major wars that were very destructive. So what Pocahontas does represent is the relationships that existed in the colonies as those colonies were kind of in their growing pains and then getting more and more powerful. The union between the two demonstrated how Europeans used the advantages afforded to them by epidemics and leveraging their trade goods to insert themselves into indigenous economic and political networks. And so natives, acting according to reciprocity, probably accepted and encouraged these relationships, thinking that it would benefit them in the long run. But once the colonizers, who once very much needed these relationships to survive, so Rolfe needed this relationship, not necessarily to survive, but he needed it to further his ambitions. Uh, Once the colonists would realize the benefits of these relationships and then establish themselves a little bit, then they began to assert authority on the natives without engaging in reciprocity, and that would force the natives to fight back or resist. And so that's kind of a pattern we see a lot with the development of early colonies, is that there's some initial curiosity, some initial goodwill, but then degradation of relations, which gets very bad after a generation or two.